Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the Money Laundering Prevention Amendment Bill, and I join my parliamentary colleagues in saying that the bill makes provisions for strengthening the anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism, or AML-CFT, supervisory framework in St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, the issue of AML-CFT is a global issue that requires global coordination, and these amendments are in keeping with St. Lucia's commitment to become compliant with international standards. It is important for St. Lucia to strengthen its AML-CFT supervisory framework in order to effectively manage the risk associated with money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation. Mr. Speaker, we can all remember, as is clearly articulated in this House, the issues that the ECCB member countries face with that withdrawal of the corresponding banking relationships. The withdrawal of corresponding banking relationships, Mr. Speaker, had to do with the assessment of the profitability and assessment of the risk of the relationships with the domestic banks. In particular, the decisions to terminate the CBRs often relate to the correspondent bank's lack of confidence in the respondent bank's capacity to effectively manage risk. Recent changes in the international regulatory and enforcement landscape have contributed to this phenomenon, notably with respect to more vigorous and prudential requirements, economic and trade sanctions, and anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism. It is therefore important, Mr. Speaker, that St. Lucia implement the international standards in relation to the AML, the CFT framework, in order to ensure that it is not blacklisted. This act gives the Financial Intelligence Authority wider powers in relation to AML, CFT matters. In particular, Mr. Speaker, the FIA is given the power to interview and take statements from a person in relation to terrorist financing and proliferation financing. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, this amendment bill provides for the FIA or the authority, as it is defined in the Act, to conduct inspections and audits of financial institutions and persons engaged in other business activities to determine compliance with the Act. The bill also gives the FIA the power to inspect a licensed financial institution on reasonable grounds, Mr. Speaker. In addition to strengthening the powers of the FIA, the amendment bill also places requirements on licensed financial institutions. In particular, Mr. Speaker, a licensed financial institution must undertake customer due diligence measures that are consistent with guidelines issued by the ECCB. In particular, Mr. Speaker, the reporting requirement in relation to the identity of a customer in a transaction or an attempted transaction in which there are reasonable grounds for suspecting criminal conduct. The bill provides, Mr. Speaker, for a range of additional requirements that financial institutions are required to undertake with a view to strengthening its capability to detect money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, the bill will go a long way in strengthening St. Lucia's capability to address AML-CFT issues and hence improve St. Lucia's reputation in the international arena, and thus help to support the growth of the economy, and in particular, the sectors of the economy that rely on having a strong AML-CFT supervisory framework in place. Mr. Speaker, I yield the floor.